I always feel bad about interrupting this when I just listen with a kind of peripheral sense of the sound. It's such a pleasant sound of people connecting. So I always feel a little bit bad about ringing the bell and now be serious. So,
mean teacher.
yeah, no. Let's not do that. So what serious or frivolous questions do you have on your mind? What would you like to explore? Okay. Sulidra, sound. Sulidra?
It's not so much a question, but an awareness that I would love to get feedback on. I was reading this morning about karma and how when things are going well, we imagine that we're enjoying our good karma. And yet when things don't go well, we forget all about it and feel, overwhelmed and dismayed and troubled. And the invitation was to rejoice in moments when things are not going well, because we are having the opportunity to be purified of any negative karma. And I probably read that 20 times somewhere, but it was one of those moments where I was like, what would it be like, really, when things go awry, or I feel like I'm in my suffering about one thing or another, to actually take a moment and have gratitude and welcome whatever this thing was in front of me as this opportunity to purify my karma. And I was so moved and am so moved by, wow, and then that would be, it seems like equanimity. Like instead of this and this, I actually get to love the suffering and be grateful for it, and be grateful for the joys. And I don't know, I would just, I guess, love to hear about how that plays out in your life, which I'm sure you do that already.
All of a sudden it became a different question. I'm enjoying the good karma, having a lap blanket at the moment. Having the causes and conditions that make that possible. I don't know whether my life is such a grand example or not. I think there are quite a variety of ways to actually make the general principle that you're talking about work. And the model of it's you left out one part. During when things are going well, just the mirror of rejoicing that karma is being purified when things are going badly. You could say when things are going well, you could say, well, I've used up a little bit of savings of the good karma. So either way, there's an encouragement to watch what we're putting in the bank. That's one of the main things. One of the pieces about karma being purified, that only happens when we have something resembling rejoicing, or at least peace, in relationship to negative things that come up, what we take to be negative. Part of that, what makes it purification, is when we do not create additional momentum, problematic momentum in the middle of that. And the rejoicing allows us to let go of the tendency, to let go of the, for example, the prevalent tendency to blame somebody else and create negative stories about somebody else, or to be very self-indulgent in a lot of other ways. So that the ability to say, oh, actually I have an opportunity here. There's something going on. And merely by letting go of the usual habit of basically kind of, you could say, turning what could be an opportunity into not an opportunity. Turning it back into just the habits that create the kind of confusion and suffering that we usually create. So I'd say that's, and it goes further. And when we can start out with suspending the usual momentum that we cultivate in response to negative things, then it's possible to be with whatever the experience is, just to kind of be there. And then we can go deeper into it and notice that it's not just one thing. It's an unfolding series of experiences. It's an unfolding. And in that, then we can start to see something more about the character of experience in general as it unfolds. It's just as good an opportunity, if not a better opportunity, than positive experiences for seeing how things unfold. The problem with positive experiences is we want to rush and bet more money on the roulette wheel. We want to, we're in it. Everything's going well. We've nailed it. Oh, cool, go. We're actually creating negative karma at that point. But we don't take the opportunity to look kind of, well, let's just see what's going on here. I don't want to just see what's going on here. I want to indulge in this. I want to revel in this wonderful, entertaining experience that I'm having. So the unfortunate circumstances allow us to perhaps, since we don't really want them to hang around, we might, and since we're not going to make them go away, just shut up, go away, then there's an opportunity to look and to see the impermanence, to actually witness the impermanence of experience as it unfolds. And we can go deeper and deeper. It can actually be the opportunity to see something, see the kind of the possibility for experience to be liberated in its own ground. That's also there in whether we relate to something as pleasurable, unpleasurable, or a neutral experience. The possibility is always there. But the problematic experience is one where we are probably more likely to stop and look.
I love this question because it's somewhat difficult. I think when I heard that teaching about, if you bear negative, so-called negative, difficult circumstances with patience, with kindness, with gentleness, it purifies. And I kind of doubted that quite a bit because it sounded like some sort of magic, like, what's that? And I've told this story before, but it's so apropos. It was my deep experience of this thing, this purification thing, when I've been practicing for about 10 years and got breast cancer, and also I went blind in my left eye. I had a spontaneous retinal detachment 6 weeks after my mastectomy. So these were pretty startling things. And I had the great fortune to be quite close with my teacher at Sravasti. I wasn't living there then, but also with her teachers, and two of them, and older Tibetan lamas. And so I got some guidance through this thing, and one of the lamas just kept saying to me, never think of any of this as anything but purification. He was saying, never think that it's anything else. And I was so startled because he was always such a gentle, kind of happy, jolly, fatherly type, and he was like fierce. And but I trusted him so much. Every time my mind would go to fear, or my old I'm being punished, or the victim of why does this happen to me, and I would just go, it's purification. I don't understand that, but it's purification. And I stayed very honest. I don't understand that. Well, what I got by the end of it, through some other help too, about how to deal with the medical profession, like my teacher told me, you're going in there just to be kind to them. Forget your operation, forget that you're a patient. You're just going to help some overworked, overburdened people. Now that was interesting. And so I went into my operation like, okay, I guess I'm just here to see how the nurses are and how the surgeon is and all that. And it was quite, it made it so easy in some way. It was very stand on its head. Anyway, and I would lose it and gain it and lose it and gain it, but that was helpful. But back to the purification, what I came to understand out of that was that the purification is the change in your mind from carrying the teachings that way. You carry the view that it's impermanent, I'm labeling it negative, it can be transformed, it's purifying. You carry those, that's the purification. I had some sort of miracle stuff going on, like Buddha's out there, or Chenrezig, or somebody purifying. No, it's the change in your mind from that very practice. So that's the transformation that occurs. And so the very difficult thing turns into something quite beautiful. I mean, I got less afraid of death. I got less afraid of going to the hospital. It was like I got stronger and I got closer to my teachers. So it just became something quite good. So I started understanding why people say, oh, my cancer became my friend. Or I always thought, oh, yeah, right. But it did. It did. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a very, the piece of dealing with what sounds like a kind of a magical equation. Yeah. I think that's a very important to see actually what's going on in terms of transformation. Sally?
So the promise of our practice is really radical transformation, which you've already been talking about this morning. And at the same time, I know that my personal tendency is to make the practice smaller than that, to want to turn it into something that I just use to feel a little less stressed or a little sharper in my mind as I go through the day. So when it comes to relating to my own practice, I'm a little suspicious of my own assessment of where I am and what I should be doing. And I guess I have this question about how do you know if you're doing the right thing in your practice, if you're doing the right practices, if it's time for a change, if something should shift. Yeah, that's really it. It's not any more formed than that.
Mm-hmm. How to know if you're doing the right thing and whether it's time to shift somewhere. I think there are two pieces, but I'll go back to the beginning about the kind of the grand aspiration versus the progress that we can measure in terms that we can see from where we sit. And I think that just to start out with, it's actually necessary to hold both of those and to not make them into enemies. To allow, kind of figure out how you can get out of a kind of a zero-sum approach to that, where either I'm going for enlightenment for all sentient beings and I have absolutely no concern for myself, or I'm just busy trying to kind of make the next little thing work out. So I think it's actually important to allow the wider aspiration to seep into those small pieces. And it's very, I could just give one example of that. If I think, oh, if I can wash my mind just a little bit better, maybe I can hold my tongue in the next meeting and not get myself into quite so much trouble, and people will like me better. I've done it. And I would say that actually probably most people appreciated the fact that I did it. Probably even including you at some point, even though you didn't know that that's what was going on. But I could have been worse. That's what I'm saying. I could have been worse. It's such a joy having a Sangha that you work with. It really is in the long run. But those kinds of things, if we introduce the piece of dedication, where we can hook that back, and even though we might say, all I'm seeing is my short-term benefit right now, may this actually be the seed for some deeper benefit for myself and for all beings. I think it can become kind of simple. And then in that, instead of kind of getting out the microscope and looking for flaws in our approach, we will actually we'll get out the microscope and focus the sun's rays on what this is, and it will have the opportunity to ignite into something more. So I think it's possible to kind of allow both of those things to go together. And in a certain way, I think it's really necessary to do these incremental things because it's very difficult actually to see deeply into this territory of what liberation of all beings might actually involve, because we actually haven't seen exactly what liberation of moi is about. We haven't seen that one yet. So there is a kind of an openness about that that I think it's good. And then when we can actually see how things are working kind of incrementally, we can look for edges in that. We can look for further openings. And then we have both kind of the sense of the vastness of the aspiration and kind of, actually, I see how this works kind of moment to moment, day to day. I can see some possibilities. So that's where I would start with that. And then the aspect of the question, how do we know if we're doing the right thing? Usually if over, the rule of thumb is if over time we can look and we can see that we're becoming kinder, that's one of the best yardsticks. In terms of what we might do next, this becomes a bit subtler, and the farther along we get, the more I think we need to rely on mentors, colleagues and mentors, to see kind of what some possibilities might be. That moment of, I think I've got a lot, I've been given a kit of parts, but I wasn't necessarily given the instructions about how to put them all together. Then it's good to say, I've got a what's it and a what's that. Hints? What do I do? So it says, oh, you ring the bell. That's how those pieces go together. You actually have the pieces, but you often need some kind of encouragement and some freshness to see how the pieces can be put together in our practice. So that's, I think, that's where I would go with that. But I think it's also, it's good also to remember that the aphorism in the mind training of the two witnesses rely on the primary witness, that in the end, we are the one that actually has to look clearly. We have to develop the capability of looking more and more deeply and more clearly into our own experience and how our practice is actually meeting experience, how our practice is dissolving confusion. See what that is. We're the only ones that can actually really do that. And Bokar Rinpoche, I remember the metaphor he used in 1996, said something, we do have to rely on the guru. We have to rely on the Buddha, but the guru is not going to take us, it's not going to operate the elevator for us to get us to the top floor. It doesn't work like that. So it's something that we actually have to get deeper and deeper in touch with our potential and how the tools are that work on that. And within that, it's very individual what it is that we actually need to invest our time in at any one point. But I think actually you might be pretty good at it. Just my sense. I might have more confidence than you do. The follow-up here. Yeah, I know, but Sally, we're in conversation here.
Thank you. Sorry to disrupt the flow. Yeah, I don't want to give the impression that I have no sense of change as a result of my practice. And in fact, I think the question really arises from the place of having seen some change, and after years of practice, reaching a place where refuge actually feels real to me and accessible on a regular basis, and purification feels genuine to me and not about rejecting myself, like, oh, I'm this horrible being. I need to do purification so I can get rid of this horrible being. I have a different relationship to that now. The wish to just be able to clean that confusion. Like, I feel the weight of that confusion. And sometimes when I'm working on the Nundra practices, and so sometimes I'm doing the refuge practice, the prostrations, and you visualize the protectors as part of that. And there are really days where I feel like, where is the guy with the flaming sword to just cut through this? Like, I want so badly to put some of this stuff down. Like, just cut it out. I'm just ready to be able to take it off like a heavy cloak or something. Like, and I don't know how to take that next step. I don't know what the thing to do is to let me push forward at this point. So.
Yeah, it's that's a good point to have a conversation with a mentor. And just as a general observation, whether it's appropriate in this situation or not, the further along we go, the more I think it's important to make sure that we have means for using these challenges as ground for insight practice. That the sword, at certain points, the sword means different things, but one of them is cutting the root of confusion. And that's something that's, so we really have to engage the insight practices in order to really see how that stuff is coming up in the moment, and see how the stickiness is coming up in the moment. And it's actually even more simple than I just said it, so that's a dimension, and over time, I think that becomes more important to find ways to incorporate that. At the outset, everything we do actually in our practice actually involves cultivating insight. Just because even just the basic calm abiding practice cultivates some insight into how loony this little mind is. Didn't notice that before. That's an insight. We wouldn't say, that's insight. It is in a way, but it's a step along the way. The deeper we go into the practices of looking at how experience arises, looking into the nature of the thingness of things that arise in our experience, and the nature of you could say awareness, or even more, it's more like a verb, awaring, the nature of these, the making things into things, and then the treating something awareness as it says. Awareness itself has been confused as a self, as it says in the Mahamudra Aspiration Prayer. So the more that we can lean into those things, the better. At the beginning, those things are very, very unstable. It's kind of like we actually need to do them in a very controlled, in a small laboratory, kind of a small laboratory for short periods of time. Otherwise, it gets confusing. But over time, we can see the general unfolding of insight practice as this this gradual thing. So then being able to find the spot, find how to use the circumstance that's arising for us as the means to go deeper. That often requires conversation, kind of more individual spiritual spelunking. Okay, down. Okay. Sam. Wait for the microphone, Sam.
With regard to the earlier question about suffering being a joyful experience, I've recently been exposed to and practicing a Christian theology, and in the esoteric Christian theology, in particular, a book by a man named Watchman Nee. Watchman Nee was a gentleman who wrote a 3-volume book on the esoteric workings of Christianity, and he separates our being into 3 parts, which is the first one is our spirit, the second one is our soul, and the third is our body. And the spirit is that which animates the body. The soul is an entity that acts as the thing that our personality develops around this tug of war between our body and our spirit, because there's always going to be, well, you've heard it before. In order for there to be produced enlightenment, there has to be an irritant. For the pearl produce a pearl, there has to be an irritant placed inside the clam, right? So it's the stuff that it's the fasting. Take a fast. It removes us from our attachment to our physical to the body, and helps us experience our spirit, because we're learning how not to be so attached with outcomes in the physical realm, because the physical realm is only one small part of who we are. We are actually multidimensional beings, and you could say, well, there's 12 levels. Well, are there any levels really to an infinite spiritual being? I don't think so. I think for me, it's been a practice of, sometimes unwittingly experiencing extremes of suffering. Now I believe it's my higher self that has placed me in situations where I've had to endure extreme hardship and have been forced to, like David Carradine and Kwai Chang Caine, we're in that Kung Fu was the name of the show. He had graduated his training.
I'm trying to figure out what the question might be here.
Well, the question is, I think, with regard to whether or not our activities are going to be suffering or not, if they're going to be joyful, depends on how we look at whether or not we're intentionally detaching ourselves from our physical lives. Because in that way, if we're not so attached to outcomes, in my work, in my play, if I'm looking at it as all the same thing, it more or less is. And if we're experiencing suffering, it's because that's an area we need to go, okay, that's the area I need to work on in terms of my detaching from just my physical life. See what I'm saying?
I'm kind of following you explaining something, but I'm trying to see do you have a question in here?
Oh no, I was just adding to.
Oh, okay.
It's the grist. All this stuff that we endure is grist for the mill. So it can be joyful, knowing that it's going to push us beyond our limited understanding in the moment. That was just a comment. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Cynthia, did you have a? And I saw your hand twitch at some point.
Thank you. Yeah, it twitched a while ago. When Salidra was talking, and you respond about the, and then you responded, and Zopa responded, I was wondering. It seemed to me that was a tangent with merit, and as in, okay, to put this in context, my question in context. Last week, I think or recently, you responded to somebody asking what the Mahamudra and the dedication prayer meant. And you said it in a way that was new to me. You talked about the basis, And then the way I remembered it was the basis, and then the process, and then the fruition.
Ground path fruition.
Yeah, and it was like, yeah, there's stages. And so the idea of feeling the purification, whether it's a source from joy or from pain, seemed to me to be similar to how I've sometimes thought of merit as not something that's banked, but merit in the tangent point. I'm wondering, is it in the path, the process, where if I see the joy or the delight thing or the painful thing, and I see it as a way to work with it, then that's the process. What awareness do I bring to it? I mean, is that like a false construct in my mind that they're tangents there, the idea of purifying or merit in this process way?
Mm-hmm. Well, purification and accumulation of merit are sometimes spoken as similar dynamics. Kind of, they're part of the path. Taken to going into it further, the word Buddha or Sangye in Tibetan actually points towards the unity, kind of a union or of this, with one side pointing towards this exhaustion of completely free of all obstacles and karmic baggage, you could say, and the other one is the fruition of all positive possibility. And then to go back to the ground path and fruition, the ground was pure to start out with, and the fruition is recognizing the purity. The process is this purification and accumulation of merit. So, and that, I could say other things too, but I think, it's fair to sort of see some parallels there.
And the Sangye?
Sangye.
Purify and perfect?
We're going further into Tibetan at the moment than I would go on my own. I venture there enough so that you might think that I could go there at will in any direction, but it's just a fake job.
So I just want to see if I heard this right. So then were you saying that the purification is a purification of confusion? It's not
the root.
Really the pure, I mean, maybe the confusion is karma, so it's all this same, never mind.
Right, now, of the two witnesses, rely on the primary one.
You just did. Then you weren't. Then you weren't.
Thank you all for contributing your questions and your observations. And now we have a chance to dedicate. And as we were talking earlier, this is a chance to take whatever immediate activity that we're engaged in and then connect it to our deeper aspirations. And it's a moment to then again open our hearts, allow the minds to settle and open our hearts and make the wish that it be of benefit and lead to the liberation of all beings.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Okay. So
All
just so that will go on the streaming, we will be meeting with the Mind Training Group on November 30th. Thank you, Tracy, for the clarity.
That streaming goes both ways sometimes.
Hopefully. Okay.
Thank you again.
Window is in the direct glare of the camera.
Are we using that or this?
They didn't
Hopefully they're using this one. I'm going to go check. I'm curious.
I
really
was
have
hoping
to
that
get
we were going to put a
Yeah, we need a curtain.
put a Ethernet plug on that side,
Yeah, we never did, so we're stuck. I think we're
so
stuck.
we can reach from here.
Okay.
But it's also, we do need a curtain.
We need
These
a
folks
curtain.
are
I
just
know.
sleeping.
Well, even over here.
Yeah, and it moves through this whole
We
group.
can go with,
like
this is where we can go with a thin one. Real
Yeah,
thin, just to cut the glare.
yeah.
And then later we'll have an insulating one.
Yeah, just something that blocks some of that glare. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm going to go check and see how it is.
Okay.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
So good. You need to ask, how's your brother doing? Oh, he came back from the depths, which is hard to do at 86. He was really close to letting go of life. I could tell, even with just a hip operation. Yeah, it stirred up a lot of other stuff with his prostate and urine.
But it's fine. No, don't
But
apologize for
his
going into
his
those
daughters and I helped take care of him. And then his favorite sons moved up from California